Welcome to the Steven Cimino Says Boom Show issue number 80.
Boom.
Ooh.
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Steven Cimino Says Boom Show, issue 80, and man, we're still here. Can you believe we made 80 episodes?
80.
Barely. Before we get into it, now, what's going on, brother?
Oh man, I'm excited. But first, before we get into the show, everyone, please make sure to look below, click that subscribe button, and smash that bell so you get notifications when we go live and we upload some great content. And gentlemen, I'm excited to talk to our guest tonight. This is his 4th or 5th appearance on the show, and man, I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be great.
Oh, and his official first appearance as a Cimino employee, and he's part of the team. He's officially part of the Pop XP, the Roy boys, or the Roy and Conway boys. But before we get into that, now, Steve, I got something to say to you. I love you so much. You wear many hats, many hats. You're my bodyguard, maybe occasional lover. Latex. Wait a second.
What?
Latex
connoisseur.
Is that an
ad for your OnlyFans?
Wait a second. Latex connoisseur, ABBA lover, all syntax and all that. But wait a second. Now all of a sudden, Steve's a pirate. Now hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, hold on. Now before I have you say anything about being a pirate, I'm going to tell you why I can't stand pirates. When I started in this business, back in like 2013, 14, I was a comic dealer. And so at the end of the long day, 7 hours, you go out, and Steve, we're packing the boxes up, you're tired. You just want to go get something to eat and all this stuff. And one day I was parked next to the pirate show. And so we're all this is like literally like an hour after the show and we're packing. And so I look at the guy and he looks at me, he goes, Hardy, it's hard to get all the parts in the car that we got to. And I'm like, dude, it's an hour after the show. And I'm like, and he still got the act going. And they all still got the whole thing going. And I'm thinking, they talk like this even after the show. All I'm saying, Steve, I love you, but just don't, once the show's over, let the act go. Be Steve again. What do you got to say to that, my friend?
Well, I was asked to be a pirate at the party. And as you know, I was a little bit more flamboyant than any other pirate there's ever been.
Oh, ever.
And, but yeah, it's not my usual thing, but I am definitely qualified to be a pirate.
Yes.
Because I do come from the right country. But yeah, just a one-off.
Okay. It's always good to see Steve, like, when he throws up another video, I happen to be tagged to, like all of them. I'm like, oh, what's Steve doing now? Where are we going with this way, Steve?
You really want to be known as the flamboyant pirate, though?
Well, pirates are flamboyant, but I took it.
He's a ladies' man, everyone. Let's just be clear on that.
All right. Enough. I always got to talk about what Steve's, his antics and all that stuff. I love him as baby Thanos. I don't want him to ever change, but he's ever evolving. Okay, so anyways, today we got a special guest. Steve, tell us about our guest today. I know you love him.
Sometimes I have out-of-body experiences, and the fact that we've had Gerry on a couple of times, Mr. Gerry Conway, of course. He's one of my personal creative heroes. He has written some of my most favorite stuff ever. Now, I've got 16 or 17,000 Marvels behind me.
Yes, sir.
And he is in the upper echelon of writers. He just managed to get me. He gets me every time. And the fact that he did it so young, it's amazing, because when I think of his age and I equate it to what I was doing at his age, I would have been woefully inadequate. I think we're very fortunate to still have Gerry here to parlay his information to us. And we are very honored that he's on this show. And I will try my best not to slather too much like I have done in the past.
Absolutely. And what Gerry pointed out to me, that he was the youngest writer ever on Spider-Man, and now he happens to be the oldest writer on Spider-Man ever. He's still getting the gigs, and that's an incredible feat if you think about it, right? I mean, that's pretty cool. But anyways, once again, Mr. Conway is part of the Semino team. So any booking and all that comes to me, we're going to make it happen. I'm taking Gerry all around the world. Me, Gerry, and Frank Castle going to start it, and we're going to take these bullets all over the world. It's going to be a good time. So anyways, without further ado, let's bring in the living legend himself, the boy, Gerry Conway.
Hi guys. I always am stunned when I'm referred to as a living legend. It's like, wait, when did that happen? Yeah.
There's no escape now, Gerry. There's none. And once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the team. But yes, Gerry, you were always if Roy didn't want the gig, it all got thrown to Gerry. It was like Stan threw it on Roy, Roy threw it on to Gerry, and Gerry got to write. Before we get into the topic that we're going to talk about today, tell me about that. Because you went to Marvel, didn't you visit Marvel when you were a kid? Even before you started working there?
When I was really young, which was like 13, 14, I went on the DC office tour. They did a tour back in the 60s, introducing some of the artists who worked in the bullpen and so on. And then I went over to Marvel, and Marvel didn't have a tour. So Denny O'Neil, who was working for Marvel at the time, came out and said hello to me. And, it was very, very cool, because I was at that point a fairly big fan of Denny's.
Wow.
He hadn't yet gone over to DC. I think Roy brought him to Marvel. Yeah, he brought him to Marvel, and he didn't really fit there. And he left and went to DC, which was a perfect match. He and Dick Giordano hit it off. He and Julie Schwartz, and of course his work with Neil Adams was iconic. But I met him. I was 15 years old, I guess.
So what did you start writing for Marvel 2 years later? I mean,
I worked for DC. I worked with Dick Giordano, doing some writing. I think I sold my first story a month before I turned 16.
Geez.
So it was a 3-page story that Murray Boltinoff bought from me by mistake. He thought I was working with Dick, but Dick hadn't actually bought anything from me. But he'd see me coming in every week, and he assumed that I was writing for Dick. So he offered me a 3-page suspense story, and made me rewrite it 10 times during the summer. And then got horrified when he realized that I had not sold a story before. Yeah.
And one more question. How did you feel being so young and seeing your first work in print? Like, I mean, like that must have been so mind blowing.
My girlfriend at the time wouldn't believe me when I told her that I had stories in the comics. So I had to wait until they actually came out and showed her, here, see, proof. I don't, I've said that breaking into comics was a sign of enormous self-confidence that may or may not have been deserved. And I just accepted it. I assumed this is what happens. It only was a couple of decades later when I would refer back to that and recognized, oh my gosh, I was a kid, literally a kid.
Yeah, my God. Oh my gosh. It's so crazy how you don't even realize. Me and Steve go nuts with these stories because when you guys talk about it, you got and how you guys make into it. It's almost like, well, yeah, I kind of slipped through this. I mean, you guys are like one in a million. Like, I mean, it's like, it's just like it's not that common and it's not that easy to happen. So
You can't
just
do that
hearing how
nowadays.
go ahead now.
I said you can't do that nowadays. You can't just,
Yeah.
get those relationships and almost have that, mentoring apprenticeships anymore.
Well, the thing is that I was very lucky because I lived in Queens, and of course, the DC offices were in Manhattan, so it was a subway ride away, and that enabled me to go there every couple of days, make myself annoying, and learn. And Dick Giordano told me years later that when I first came in and started offering stories, that he didn't think I had any talent. That he just sort of was humoring me and hoping that I would eventually go away or actually develop into something.
Oh,
Yeah.
crazy. If I was like, I just think about it. I'm sure Steve is across the pond. I would be sleeping. If I knew Marvel and DC was like up the street from me, I would be sleeping on the streets, like next to the bricks and all that. Steve, you think so? Would you like?
Yeah, I would be doing exactly the same thing. But for me, what blows my mind is I still have some old comics that I wrote when I was 15. And I read them now and I thank all of the gods that no one has ever seen them because they are the biggest pile of ridiculousness and immaturity that's ever been known. And like enough, it's between me and the secrets of the death. That's basically it. So when I think of you breaking through and going on to these titles, where were you drawing your life experiences from? Because you couldn't have lived yet. I mean,
I didn't.
You're right. This is the great mystery. Where were you pulling these sources from?
In terms of Spider-Man, I actually was writing about my life. Peter Parker and I were both the same age, experiencing the same frustrations and anxieties. So it was just almost an autobiography, except for
wow.
the supervillains. In terms of writing the other stuff, I don't know where it came from. I was a couple of summers before, Dick Giordano was giving me work, letting me write short stories in the horror magazines, the suspense magazines, really. And I guess I was 16 or 17 years old. And he asked me if I wanted to write some stories for the romance magazines. I was like, sure. I did the math, and if I wrote one of those a week, I would be doing pretty well. So I was writing for women, for girls, and I hadn't really had much experience with them at all.
Right,
Um,
right.
but I was able to translate my emotional state. I mean, there was a lot of emotional stuff going on in my life, um, and I translated that into my work. It was sort of how I escaped the uh, the stresses, I guess.
Yeah.
It enabled me to reach emotional depths that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to explore.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, now speaking of Spider-Man, we're going to go into our topic today. Let's have Steve here. Steve, tell us the significance of the death of Gwen Stacy. Give people out there that don't know, and if they're out there, I would love to know. But
Well,
give people a little.
yeah, I mean, obviously, the impact of this story
Oh,
was so massive. When I was a kid, when I was, first collecting, no one was yet talking about your most famous creation yet, the Punisher. Everyone, which of course is, that's a massive, iconic franchise, world-crushing creation.
oh.
But before that, everyone, whenever they dealt with the Gerry era, would say, "Oh, do you have the issues with Death of Gwen Stacy? Oh no, you're never gonna get those. Oh no. Yeah, no. I'm very ready. I have customers on waiting lists. It would drive me nuts. I only came across it in reprint form finally. But it was, even then when I would read, Amazing Heroes Comics Journal or, anything, there'd be like an interview and people would be like, I remember when I read Spider-Man 121, 122. And there'd be like this whole massive 6,000 page synopsis of, what it meant to the industry, what it meant. And at the time I was trying to grasp it. And I was just like, wow. And then within about 3 or 4 years of embracing the hobby, embracing the history, I sort of sat back and went, oh my God, this young kid comes on the title.
Mm-hmm.
He creates a couple of characters, and then he kills Stan's baby. Unbelievable, So again, it's hard to explain how big it was back then, but at that time, that was your claim to fame. Was that's what you were famous for, and it was a story that was like the high point of drama and consequence. Because at the time, years later, people were like, oh, the death of Phoenix. When it comes to deaths, Gwen Stacy still holds true. I know they've got 5,000 Gwen Stacys out there now. But back then, when I was a kid, those two issues, ground shake.
And the significance, Gerry, of that, what they say is the last page of 121 with Spider-Man shouting and all that stuff is the beginning of the Bronze Age. That's what they usually kind of point at right there, because that's now all of a sudden, it's not, Silver Age was more, fantastical. And now all of a sudden it got dark. So with you here, we got Roy's version and all that stuff. Tell us the beginnings. So let's get this out there, and the traumas, like this spilled over into real life too. And Gerry, we're glad to still have Gerry upon us, especially during New York during the 70s. So Gerry, tell us the beginnings of the story, talking with Stan and Roy and all that, how that kind of permeated into these two issues. And before you go into it, 1 second, that's when Gil Kane and John Romita, the art on Spider-Man was so it was so unbelievable. Like that for me is Spider-Man. It was incredible. But go ahead, Gerry.
Oh, sure. Well, let's first of all, I have to give credit to John Romita, because it was his notion that in order to keep reader interest, we should kill off one of our main characters. He was referencing, he was a big fan of Terry and the Pirates and Steve Canyon, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what he pointed out was that those newspaper strips would, every couple of years, kill off somebody. And, just to remind the readership that this was a real story.
Wow.
So he suggested, that we kill off a character, and his thought was Aunt May. And I didn't like that idea because Aunt May was still story material. She was kind of crucial to the mythology. She's partly the reason that Peter does what he does, is he's protecting her, and that by extension, all the people that he encounters. So I didn't think that Aunt May was a good choice. I wanted to kill Gwen Stacy. And I just never connected with her as a character. I had only written like 6 or 7 issues at that point. And she'd only been around for like 4 or 5 years. And I just didn't buy that she and Peter were a couple. It just seemed, she just seemed so bland and uninteresting. It's like, why are they together? I knew that I wanted Mary Jane to ultimately be Peter's girl. I had been knocked over by her introduction, and I've always kind of had a thing for redheads. So I suggested, well, what about Gwen Stacy? And Roy was like, well, okay, and Stan was, they ran it by him and he was fine. Of course, it was the way I executed it that it ended up upsetting so many people. And I don't even know why I did it the way I did, the snick. Maybe it was the way that Gil drew the sequence, because he had her swinging back, as if she'd snapped her neck. So I put a little stick in. And I think that's what upset people more than anything else, because it made Spider-Man responsible
Yes.
for her death.
Yes.
Sometimes heroes fuck up. And
Yes.
that's the difference between before and after. The heroes always succeeded in the Silver Age. And in the Bronze Age, they fucked up.
Yeah.
They became more human. I can't take credit for that because I didn't know what I was doing. But it just seemed like a natural progression to me. There was a real blowback from readers over that.
Oh boy.
We had lots of mail. Thank God Twitter wasn't around back then.
There would be nothing left.
Gerry, a few issues after that, Roy had to. People were going so nuts on, was it Spider-Man or like who was truly the person who killed her, and he had to write that paragraph saying yes, it was Spider-Man that killed Gwen Stacy, and like that.
I didn't realize that he'd done that. Oh wow.
Oh yeah, it's a few issues after that. He had to write a paragraph in there, and he had to state that it was. I'll have to find that, but he had to state that yes, it was Spider-Man's mistake that did that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that didn't quench any flames and all that stuff. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I had to stop going to conventions
Man.
because I was being verbally assaulted. And I was a young kid, I was 19 years old,
Wow.
and I wasn't prepared for that, emotionally. So it was a difficult time especially when Stan,
Yeah.
started responding to um, uh, students at colleges when he would go on speaking tours, and they would say, "Who decided to kill Gwen Stacy?" And he'd say, "I don't know. I was out of town."
Stan ditched
Oh,
you.
you
Stan
stopped it.
ditched
You were
you.
the publisher of the company. This is a big deal. This is our top-selling book. That was Stan.
Stan ditched him, left him for
Yeah.
dead. Left
Oh,
him.
Yeah,
alone.
he left me he left me like roadkill.
Yeah. So, like, because I know Roy got some of that backlash too, but you, like, not like you.
Oh yeah.
Gerry, I'm interested. What did somebody? Can you remember what someone said to you at a show? I'm so curious.
Well, I mean, they cursed me out, the um I mean, it was extremely hostile stuff, but I was 50 years ago, I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
And ironically, um, one of the things that John, you were saying that I'm known for the Punisher. I'm known still as the man who killed Gwen
Oh,
Stacy. Um,
oh, yes.
and I don't mind that. It's like a woman at one convention cosplayed as Gwen, having fallen off the bridge. So she was wearing the green jacket and the yellow. It was like, oh my gosh, I had a picture with her. So
And what's funny is that as people forget about how iconic the Green Goblin's death was in the next issue, that was unbelievably huge. But they always kind of forget that because it was a great, and they just stick with the Gwen Stacy. But talk about that. How did you have that in your head on how the Green Goblin was going to die? Unbelievable.
I knew that the Goblin had to die when I wrote the Gwen Stacy story. I did not know how I was going to execute that. I mean, the choice was obviously that Spider-Man directly kills the Goblin, but that was never that passed through my head, and it was like, no, he has to rise above that. That was the core for my thinking. And then when we did the story, I had wanted it to be the climax of the book, the big moment. It had to be, this was the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's, most merciless foe.
Yeah.
But Gil squeezed it all into one page. Everything that you see in that book today, that 2-page spread, was John coming back into the mix and redrawing or extending the sequence. Because he was just like me, it was like, no, we got to do this. So part of it is Gil, and part of it is John. It was you talk about reading your old stuff, and that it upsets you when you do that too. I've had to do the introductions. I was asked to do the introductions to a lot of the omnibuses and Marvel Masterworks of my work, and so I had to go back and look at it, and I'm embarrassed by a lot of it, because it is over the top. It is, a very strenuous and emotional stuff. But the one story that I think I kind of nailed was that two-parter.
Oh,
It's like people ask me, "Do you remember this or do you remember that?" And this is the only one that I'm really proud of. And I wrote it when I was 19 years old.
yeah. And Gerry, it's still fresh. You can actually read it today and you can still get the emotional feel for it. Now, think about that. It basically started the Bronze Age, and then it has still this freshness. You can even read The Dark Knight Returns now, and it's sometimes some of the stuff is kind of like it's a little in the 80s there, and it's just kind of.
Well, we're all tied. We're tied to our eras,
right? But those deaths. I mean, think about it. You saw that, like in the first Spider-Man, how Green Goblin dies. It's taken all inspired by that, and then in the next Spider-Man with the Garfield there, when Gwen Stacy falls, they had her look exactly like the panel that Gil Kane did, and it's so iconic. And Steve, you would know the best. Where would you rank that in the death of comics, like of characters in comics? Like, where would that death be ranked? There's a lot of great deaths, like you were saying, but you would probably know the best out of us. Where do you think the death of Gwen Stacy ranks in all comic history?
I would have to say, even with the 6,000 Gwens we have today, I still think the death of Gwen Stacy is the high watermark of shock and awe. And I really do agree with you, Gerry. If you had done that in today's era, you would be on CNN. There would be an uproar. There would be people in the streets. There would be deep conversations about how terrible a human you are and about what you're doing, about the violence against women. The impact is just sheer incredible. And of course, obviously, you were there in the maelstrom when at first everyone's just like, okay, yeah, seems like a good idea. And then those letters come in. And then there's the fury. And then there's the backtracking. Oh, I wasn't even in town. I don't think it can ever be repeated because there's a blasé attitude now, because everyone's died in, the last 20, 30 years.
The cynicism.
Yes. But at that point, the fact that we'd gone through the Silver Age, we'd had, we'd had Captain Stacy die in issue 90, which was like, wow, Stan, you're getting a little dark here. But to have your main female character have her neck snapped and then there's no coming back, I think it's number one because it did signal an end to a certain era of naivety, and you couldn't go back. Pandora's box was opened by you because you were young. You were just going ahead and just doing things. You had your blinders on and you're doing it thinking, well, this seems like a good idea to me. You weren't thinking of the ramifications, because you're young, you're 19, So I don't think anything when it comes to a storyline or a death gets anywhere close to it because obviously even, what was it now? 8 years later, we had the death of Phoenix, which was like, the death of Phoenix, but quite quickly they negated that by having 600 billion phoenixes flying around. But then again, it's different. We're talking about a cast member, a cute little blonde girl, the girlfriend,
It's
so
like,
nicey feisty.
it's like killing Lois Lane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would say
she wasn't that long in her life.
What do you think about that now? Where do you think it ranks?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, now, what do you think it ranks in the death?
Oh, I'd have to pretty much agree with Steve on this because at that turning point, I mean, on top of it, like, kind of now kicking off the Bronze Age, like that was like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. snapped her neck. I mean, that's a huge leap of faith to take in delivering that story. And like you said, getting that backlash, I think it has to be about to me like the number one death in comics. Besides that highly collectible Superman one.
And Gerry,
rare collectible.
Gerry, I'm curious. Okay, Gwen Stacy dies. What did Stan think about the Green Goblin dying? Because I know he loved the Green Goblin too. So did he have any qualms about even Roy? I never asked Roy this. Did anyone have any qualms? Okay, we're going to kill Gwen Stacy, but Goblin's going too. Those are two major characters.
Well, to be fair to both of them, I don't know if Stan knew this, but I had told Roy that the Green Goblin would come back as Harry. So, and from an emotional, I mean, I wrote almost everything from an emotional place.
Yeah.
And the idea that Harry, who was at that time Peter's best friend, would turn evil, to me was actually more of a kick in the ass than the death of Gwen. I used to say about Gwen that nothing became her but her death. Before she died, nobody cared. After she died, now we have all these Gwen books.
Yes.
And the reason we have those Gwen books is because that death had such an impact.
Yes. Because of you. Oh, absolutely. And it's just, was Stan gone when Stan was gone too when Green Goblin died too? Yeah, I will get there.
But I think the viewers were accepting.
All these doors.
That was the catharsis, that was the payoff that at least gave people a sense that justice was served.
Yeah.
That we don't live in a completely bleak world, that there are consequences to our actions and punishment.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a great comment here. Let's
Go
put
ahead.
this up here. This is from Black Spiders. Hi, Mr. Conway. Just want to say thank you for writing some of the most awesome Spider-Man comics I ever read.
Oh, that's very sweet. And Black Spider was a character that I created for
Which one?
DC. Black Spider.
Yes, in Detective Comics.
Yeah, in Detective Comics. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Twice.
Now, Gerry, when after the Gwen, like I said, you had Gwen and then you had the Green Goblin. You had two such significant deaths in there and stuff. So when did the backlash started happening right away, or where were you? It just hard. So where were you going? Where did you think that after that? Where was your mind going? Like, where am I going to go? Because where were you started going? After that.
Well, I hate to admit it, but I was a seat of your pants writer. I don't plan things out the way that people do today.
But Gerry, really quick, what I meant to say was, but did any of that backlash influence you to be like, oh, I was going to do this, but maybe not?
No, but it did influence what happened in the book, because when Stan came back, after telling people that he was out of town, he insisted that we bring Gwen back.
Yeah.
And the general atmosphere around the office can be summed up by Steve Gerber's suggestion, which was, we'll bring her back and call her Graveyard Gwen. She can be a zombie. So I came up with the notion of doing a clone story.
Yeah.
And that basically took me, 6 months. I arced it out when I was writing it. I introduced the Jackal like 3 or 4 issues before. And then that led to the Punisher.
Yeah. And Gerry, this is something, you got the death of Gwen Stacy, you got the death of Green Goblin, but then you got the Clone Saga that whether for better or for worse, years later, you inspire a crossover that just kept going and going and going.
Yeah.
Now, wait, Steve can describe this best. Steve, talk about the Clone Saga and how that impacted comics at that time. You're in the throes of that.
Yes.
How big that was. This is all because of Gerry. It's
You know, it's about a day ago, I began to think through the ramifications of your work, Gerry, on Spider-Man, and the ramifications trickling through. When you think about it, of course, number one, you have Stan and Steve, right? Stan and Steve, you have all the original characters. But when it comes to the sheer meat of modern Spider-Man stories, you have the death of Gwen Stacy, you have the introduction of the Punisher, and you have the Clone Saga. Okay? Now, those three stories alone, of course, one, the Punisher has 500 billion appearances everywhere. The Clone Saga has fingers all over the Marvel Universe everywhere. You know, Ben Reilly, everything. And it went on and on and on and on. So I don't think people realize when it comes to the creativeness and sheer money-making ability of your writing when it comes to Spider-Man,
oh my God,
you're second only to Stan and Steve. You're even more successful than David Michelini, of course, that did Venom. So in the modern Marvel universe, we've had Venom and the symbiotes, but we've had 5 million issues of Clone Saga stuff and then 5 billion issues of Gwen's. That's all through to you. But to shape it into context, I was working behind the counter as a youngster, and rumors began to spread that, you know, Spider-Man was going to be replaced. And I was like, oh, you know, come on, la, la, la. The Clone Saga starts, and everything's going on okay for a little bit. And then 6 months into the story, it's revealed that Ben Reilly was Peter Parker all the time.
Yeah.
And that's when, if we had the internet now, I had so many people coming into my store, and they came in from the front door, walked up to the counter with that, take me off the subscription list for Spider-Man. And I was like, hold on a second. Hold on. What's going on? I said, this is just a story. All the characters are there. There's subplots, the villains, the rogues gallery. And they went, I'm off. Take me off. And at that time, Spider-Man had like 6 books. So all these people came in, and it was on all day. And the owner of the store, he never came by the store. He used to work in a power station. He came by, and he goes, Peter Parker wasn't Peter Parker? It was Ben Reilly? And I was like, yeah, Ben Reilly's been Spider-Man since issue 149 or whatever it was. And he was like, what's happening? And he was going through, and he had his computer lists. I have never seen such chaotic mess in my entire life. And you know what the ironic thing is? I was loving it. I know.
That's the weirdest thing with this guy. I
was reading each issue, and I loved Ben Reilly.
I know.
I loved Ben Reilly because he didn't suffer from the same things that Peter. I was sick of Aunt May, you know, and Ben Reilly comes along, and then suddenly there was Kane, and I was like, wow, he did this, and he took out Venom in 10 seconds, you know. And I was trying to save. I was telling people, look, guys, I'm a massive Spidey fan. Come back in. And they didn't come back in. It took them 2 years to come back. The impact of that story, of course, I wasn't there in 72 but I doubt, there was no comic shops at that same era. It really did shake Spider-Man to the core. All the titles and the stories, and it's begat so many different storylines. Your storyline that came up with a clever way to get out of bringing Gwen back, instead of bringing back as a Gerber zombie, bringing back as a clone and the Jackal. That's going to go on for 1,000 years. I don't mean to, it's just going to go on and on and on. And I really do. I tip my hat because, as I said, when it comes to the creativity of Spider-Man in the modern world, there's Stan and Steve, there's you, and then there's David Michelini.
Oh gosh. And Gerry, did you get any backlash for the whole Clone Saga? Did you ever hear anything for that?
Well, not really. That one was more because it was extended over several issues. Readers had time to adjust to it. It felt like a well, it provided a potential for a lot of stories. But you have to remember, I didn't have anything to do with the actual Clone Saga.
Yes.
No, I know.
And let's be fair, that the reason that there were so many Clone Saga stories is because it really did sell well.
Yeah.
So, all those people who were saying cancel my
Yes.
subscription, they were a really small minority.
Yes. And by the way, Gerry, they came back en masse. When I began my own comic selling business, I had purchased hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of all the issues. And I used to put them in sets and I would sell them on eBay. And I'd say, oh, all you people that decided to leave, do you want to catch up? And boom, I would sell them and people were like, oh my God, Steve's the only guy that's got, because I had faith in the story. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was brilliant. And I was, I even had a couple of issue, 147, 48, and 49s that I could also sell as at the same time. So believe you me, all those people that were gnashing their teeth, they came back, Gerry. They came back for all those issues.
And the reason why I say that, Gerry, because that's when Wizard magazine was huge. And when that was going on, I remember the hot back issues to look for was always the two Spider-Mans with the jackal, your issue. Mm-hmm. And that awesome cover, too. I mean, it's fantastically done. But, that was in every single issue. That's why I was saying it was like everybody's going back to those issues and all that stuff. And there's little Gerry Conway again. What is this guy? But I'm curious. What did Stan like the Clone Saga that you did? Did he care about that, or was he gone again?
Stan wanted to take his hands off. He didn't want to have much to do with the actual comics because he was focused on selling series to TV. Right. And the like. So and he also was used to people following his instructions. So he said, bring Gwen back, and he assumed that I would bring Gwen back. How I did it, he probably wouldn't have liked that, but he was distant enough from it that it never sort of sank in. That it wasn't Gwen.
Are you saying that if Stan was more hands-on, he probably wouldn't have let you get away with that?
Oh yeah, I think he would have actually done the whole Gwen gets revived. Just he would have turned it into every
Roy
other
just
comic.
let this go, right? Roy just, he knows you're writing the good stuff. He's just letting it go, right? He doesn't care. So, I'm just saying, Roy just lets it go, right?
He's just... No, Roy had trusted me.
Yeah.
He recognized that the emotional impact of Gwen's death was more important than anything else, and just keep working that through. Let Peter deal with his grief. Let the romance with MJ play out. Figure out how to bring Gwen back without bringing Gwen back. So he was on board, but he was also in charge of 50 or 60 books.
Yeah.
And he couldn't look at all of them.
Yeah.
I think he did try to track Spider-Man because he came up with some great covers. Those covers were Roy's idea. I mean, that one cover with Spider-Man reacting to Gwen.
Yeah,
You know,
you see your
this is
boot?
where he says, "It can't be you."
Yeah.
I love that cover.
Oh. Was Roy doing the cover dialogue on that? Was he doing
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was
He did
doing
the
the
dialogue
cover
for
copy.
almost all of them. Yeah.
Wow. I
Yeah,
remember.
I honestly, I don't think, when you're saying you're talking about, writing by the seat of your pants and writing in an angst, ridden way. There's those scenes where, Peter Parker's looking up and they do those heavy black lines of depression under his eyes. And his eyes were a little bit wider than usual. I've never seen Peter so distraught in all my life. I mean, there was talk about going through the ringer. This was definitely not the 60s.
No.
The fact that Roy was allowing this stuff to go on it was the era. The 60s was over. Stan had his time. And if Stan had come back and done what he wanted to do, it would have lessened the story.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
But with you, Roy, and the rest of the other, new guys on the block, you were pushing stories forward.
And Ross Andrew and Gil.
Yes.
Ross's work on that material was just phenomenal. He was my favorite partner.
Oh yeah. I'm curious, Gerry, because Johnny Romita was such a fun-loving guy. What did he think of all the backlash that was happening to you? I'm curious. What did he ever say anything?
I think his attitude was, don't worry about it. He'll forget in a few months.
And what about Gil Kane? What did he think?
Gil was a black box. Gil, I think, had already moved on back to DC. I mean, I know that after doing that two-parter, he only did another issue or two. I don't know. I mean, I was never close to Gil. I rarely had a conversation with him. But John and Ross were both full-on collaborators.
Yeah.
Were you hearing from any like other peers? Like were any like maybe like the guys at DC are like, Gerry, what are you doing? What are you doing here? Now we got to catch up. We got to change things.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't like, I'm a living legend now, but at the time, I was an upstart kid, competing with people for jobs, and they were, for recognition. So if they had any feeling at all about the backlash, they were probably happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dog-eat-dog world over there. Yeah.
Do you think, Gerry, that there was any sense, you talk about competition, do you think there was any sense of, one-upmanship to try and think, wow, look what Gerry's done, either with Steve Gerber or, Steve Englehart, or later on with, Len Wein or anyone else going, you know what? For me to get noticed, I'm going to have to do something incredible here. Do you think there was any of that in the office?
There may have been. I mean, I wasn't aware of it. Like I said, it was a very competitive group, especially among the writers. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to probably wind down. So, any last question or thought?
Yeah.
I got one comment I just want to read here from Chris O. It just says, outside Stan, Mr. Conway has got to be the most legendary Spider-Man writer. I agree.
Gee, gosh.
See, look at that. Okay, any last words for Mr. Conway? Steve?
I will be at San Diego.
I was going to plug that. I was going to plug that at the end.
It's my first real convention in 2.5 years. So I'm looking forward to it. My wife is looking forward to it, Laura.
And then you're going to be in San Jose, though, right? You're going to be in San Jose
next month? And I'm going to in August. Let's see.
Yeah, that's how. So go ahead, Steve. Any last words for Mr. Conway?
Well, again, as I said, it's always an incredible honor for me to be speaking with you. I hold you in the highest awe. I don't know, it's just.
I'm just a guy.
Well, again, you may think that, but there's going to be 100 million other people that can maybe write Spider-Man, and they'll try, and they're going to fail compared to your record, just to be truthful. But I am going to see you in San Diego, and I am going to be making sure that on my my Instagrams and my fan base that I make sure that people come and see you, come and speak with you. So believe you me, I am very happy that you're on the show. I'll see you in San Diego.
See that, Gerry? My spider web is working. Huh? You see? I got a lot of technical in honor to watch it. And Niall, any last words for Mr. Conway?
No, as always, it's a pleasure having Gerry on. I always love hearing the stories, his accomplishments. I mean, you've truly touched all of us. That's why we want to have these conversations and catalog these events and deep diving into this stuff, because you're just a man, but you're a man that has done incredible things with your powerful imagination. And now that you're officially part of the Semino squad, the Roy boys, I'm sure we'll get the pleasure of having you on more frequently.
Yeah, Gerry, you're going to come on more. And I got one last question, Gerry. What did your parents think? Did they ever think the comics were going to lead you to like these people were going to be crazy against it? Did they ever say anything?
They never said anything specifically, but they didn't want me to be a writer. They thought. My dad actually said that writers are bums. They don't have a job. And I'm like, and at that particular point, I was making more money than him.
Yeah.
So I couldn't deal with it. My parents were not really that supportive.
Well, you changed the world with that stuff. My gosh. I mean, unbelievable. Okay, so thank you so much, Gerry. Can't wait to go see Gerry at San Diego. Roy's going to be in Plano, Texas this weekend. We're going to have a good time. All right, Steve, get us out of here, brother.
Ball.
Thank you, Gerry.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.